Hello, welcome back to the Promoted Podcast. I'm your host, Felicity Fury, and I'm joined by the wonderful Renee Wooten-Tomlin. Hello, good morning, Wanya. How are you today, Renee?
I'm great. Thanks for asking. I'm calling in from Larrakia country today. I'm going to head off to a co-working space later today. I found a new co-working space in Darwin because I'm spending so much time on my own in my house. I need to get out and I need to feel like I'm going to a job at an office. So yeah, and I met some really amazing people through the co-working space already, which I feel like I found my people in Darwin, which is so nice. How about you? How are you going?
I'm good. It's a very warm, sunny day here on the Sunshine Coast on Gubby Gubby country. And yes, very much looking forward to a Christmas break. It is that time of the year where it is busy and it's all happening. So yes, very much looking forward to that. And this week I did my last keynote, which in person for the year, which was also really great. And I wanted to bring in the topic to the podcast today because it really resonated with me how important this is and how much we don't talk about it, which is how do you actually deal with, overcome setbacks or failures? It's not a popular topic to talk about. Failing, it's funny when I post about it on LinkedIn, it is like nosedive in terms of responses, connections. We've actually run workshops called Flick the Switch on Failure, and they have been our least attended workshops. So I'm interested to see how this podcast episode goes, of how people listen to it. Maybe because it's a bit more private, we can see how many listeners we get. But yeah, this week I was speaking at QUT. Shout out to the electrical and robotics crew at QUT. I was a bit intimidated speaking to a room full of academic PhD electrical engineers and robotics peeps. There were some people in aviation. There's actually a board director from CASA in the audience, which is super cool. Cool. And yeah, it was awesome to hang out with them. They were so warm and open. And I tell you what, if they were my lecturers at uni, I probably would have gone down the electrical path. I thought it was like way too hard for me. That's why I stuck with civil. But there was such a beautiful, warm, open audience. So thank you. And they have a really tricky job. If you work in academia, you will know the grant application rate of acceptance is crazy low. So they were sharing with me that 80% of their grants do not get through. And for early career researchers from some of these big ARC grants, it's like 8% success rate. And I was speaking with some of them and we're talking about how do you actually motivate people when the success rate is so low, which was a great question. So I wanted to bring this into the podcast episode, Renee. I'm sure you've had many setbacks. I would say if you're anything like me, I've had more setbacks than successes. And I feel like that's the time that you learn the most. So when you've had those fails, publicly, privately, what are your strategies to, I guess, overcome them, deal with them, process them? What the heck do you do?
Yeah, so I have a pretty, I guess, wide girth in terms of when I go through failure, how I bounce back. Like I emotionally have to deal with it first, and then I kind of just get to a point where I'm like, all right, get over it and move on. Done. So I really feel like I need to mourn the moment. So I will feel sad for myself. I will probably be in the fetal position in my bed crying. I will call all of my people to let them know what I'm going through and what's just happened and the shame or embarrassment or disappointment that I feel. And I probably give myself anywhere between like 4 hours and a day. And then I'm like, all right, get over it, move on. So I kind of get to a point where I'm like, it's really funny actually being in my brain sometimes, like laying there in the fetal position and I'm like, all right, this is a waste of time and energy. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's happened. I can't take it back. I need to move forward. I'm not going to let this slow me down. And, we go from there. And some of my failures, it might have been like when I failed my first physics exam at university, I was shocked. I remember I had to do a bridging course because I didn't study physics in year 12. So I went and did a university kind of bridging course. I did really well in that bridging course. And then when I did first year physics for engineering, I failed. And I was literally flabbergasted. I was like, sorry, what? How did this happen? I had studied so hard and I really felt like I knew it off the back of the bridging course. So I was shocked. And to this day, I genuinely wish that I went back and contested those results. But I was so young and I believed in the system. I thought the system must have been right. I couldn't have been wrong. So therefore I accepted the results. But I was devastated and it like took a huge hit on my confidence. And I again like really reiterated, I'm too stupid to be here, which is like this ongoing dialogue I had when I was young. So, recovery from that, I did it again the next semester and I passed with flying colors. So, I think the best thing that you can do when you go through these moments is you have no other choice other than to keep going or to exit the building completely and divert course. And I was so determined to achieve the outcome of whether it was graduating uni. I remember actually I was taking off on my first flight test. It was my RPL flight test, my recreational pilot's license. And just because of the time of the day that I was always doing my flying, it meant the winds always favored runway 11 out of Bankstown. So every morning I would follow the same procedure to fly out of runway 11. And then on the day of my test, it was later in the day and the winds changed direction and I now had to fly off runway 06, I think. No, it can't have been 06. What are we? 11 plus 180 degrees, 27, something like that. Anyway, I was taking off and I literally had this moment when I was like starting to pitch around to kind of fly parallel to the runway. My takeoff procedures, I completely forgot them. I was like, shit, I haven't flown off this runway for so long. I have no idea what flight level I need to climb to right now. And it was like happening live. I was like, no, I fail. And I literally just had to say to the instructor, I was like, I'm really sorry, but I've forgotten what flight level to climb to right now. And like it was getting to, so it was either 1,000 feet or 1,500 was the departure requirement. And I just looked at him and I was like, and we were getting closer to 1,000 feet. So it was like decision point time. And he was like, well, you better figure it out real quick. He just looked at me. And I was like, trying to do the math. Like if they're flying in at this level, then I should probably fly out at this level. Like anyway, and I just got to the point where I was like, I'm sorry, like I literally can't remember and I don't want to be unsafe. So he's like, all right, taking over. And that was it. I failed the first flight test. And it was just so disappointing. And I got down the ground. I was like, God damn it. I'm so disappointed. Anyway, that was like, again, one of those moments where it was like, I really believed in myself up until that point. And that was like my first shock of like, oh shit, like maybe I'm not that good at this. Anyway, I went on and passed my next flight test after I revised my departure procedures and knew them then forever what it was like to depart from the other runway. So yeah, I've had these moments of failure and, I think if anything, again, I'm sad in the moment. I let that pass and then it's time to get back into the game. You sleep on it, you get back up and you keep trying. And I think I've always had that approach with failure. I'm not scared of failing now. And I think as an engineer, I've appreciated that failure is part of the innovation process. It's part of trying to get to that end result. I know, Felicity, you had this great post up on LinkedIn recently about James Dyson and the fact that he made 5,127 prototypes until he figured out the Dyson Airwrap. And so he failed 5,126 times to get there. So I think when you see those sorts of stats, you realize that, the people that have made it have failed many times to get there. So I don't really look at failure the way I used to. I don't get embarrassed about it the way I used to. And what I've seen in corporates since I've, begun and moved through my career is the corporates that have the best culture around failure, the ones that celebrate failure. Yeah. So bring a donut and every Friday you get a donut when you tell a story about what you failed at that week. So it's embracing this culture of like, it's okay to fail. It's okay to mess things up. Another great example is like our safety systems at Qantas back in the day. The safety management system relies on people owning up to failures or incidents and accidents. So you need to create a culture where people are willing to actually share that. They're not, reprimanded or there's no consequence, a negative consequence for when you do front up and actually share those things. So, we would have these like 8 o'clock calls where everybody would dial in and share their missed near misses or like there are actual incidents and accidents that have occurred. And so I think, the approach to it is very much it needs to be embraced if you want to have the highest like safe culture and also the most innovation. But certainly, I think that most people still see failure as this massive problem. Like, I can remember sitting in a meeting with a boss at the time, and I missed this deadline again to try and share or prepare the head of people for a communication piece that we needed to go out, and it needed to be published very last minute. And at the time, the comms team were completely inundated that week. They told me that they couldn't get this information to me until the last minute. And I failed to then let my kind of two up know that that was going to be coming last minute. And so my manager sat me down and she was like, "It's late again. This is the second time you've done this. Why do you keep doing this, Renee?" And I can remember just the misery of just like, "Oh my God, like I failed again." And then I reflected on that and I was like, no, this wasn't my fault. I was like, number one, like, there was a process that I followed and the process was delayed. So that was out of my control. What was in my control? And I sit there and I really think through then, like, what could I have done better? And the thing that makes me feel better then is I really own that. And then I, followed up with my manager afterwards and I was like, "Hey, just so you know, we had this conversation yesterday. You asked me this. I didn't really give you the right answer because I needed time to think about it. But here's what happened. Here's what I could have done better. And here's what I'm going to do next time." So it's like that communication piece is super important. And I think that that's an ongoing learning is people have different styles, different expectations, and you can fail quite often. It just looks different every time.
Yeah.
What about you, Felicity?
Oh, so good. So many good things that you shared, Renee. Well, we have that in common. I failed first year maths, which, as an engineer, probably not ideal. And I didn't do, in Queensland at the time, it was maths A, B, and C. C was the top maths. I didn't do the top maths. So I had to do like a combined maths course at uni. And it was really tricky. And I remember being so embarrassed that I'd failed. I actually failed 2 subjects in my first year and I dropped a subject. So I was just finding first year so overwhelming. So I got really behind. And I think a really aha moment for me was in that second year behind. Yeah.
You're not actually behind.
Not actually behind, but I was like, I wanted to finish this anyway program. And I felt like I didn't belong anyway. So there was a whole bunch of other things there. And for me in that second year, it was practical and it was applied. And if people have heard me speak before, you would have heard me share this story where when I realized that engineers get to build and change the world around us, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Of course I want to be an engineer. Why did anyone tell me that before? And that really became my why and my purpose. So I ended up doing 3 semesters of 5 subjects and got it done in 5 years. I had to even sit down with the head of school. I'll never forget. He was this older gentleman and he's like, "So let me get this straight. You dropped a subject and then you failed one the next semester and then you failed one the next semester. And now you're going to do 5 subjects." And I was like, "Yes, I can do it." And he was like, "Okay," because I had to get special permission to actually go ahead. I don't know why he said yes, but anyway, that was very helpful.
Amazing.
So yeah, failures all the way through.
You believed in yourself.
Yeah, I can do it. I can do it. And I failed my driving test 2 times before I passed on the 3rd time from like silly little mistakes. So I definitely haven't failed flying. Maybe that's to come because that is on my bucket list to get my RPL. So yeah, there's been so many different examples throughout my career of failure. I could do a whole episode of just all the things that have happened for me along the way. And I think the thing that really helps me get through is purpose. What is that why? When we set up Power of Engineering a few years in, we had funding from corporates, and instead of it being 3 years, it got cut back to 2. And then we had all of our volunteers in the exec team quit. It was just me and my co-founder. And that was a point of, do I keep going? This is really hard. Like, what are we doing here? And for me, I was like, do you know what? This cause is so important. We have to keep going. And so we went, okay, like similar to what you shared, Renee, what can we do differently? We actually brought on someone who was a HR person in a construction company. And so she talked to us about succession planning and rebuilding with key people in mind so that we can really sustainably grow our leaders and our team. So it became a great thing because it had us do things differently in that case. So I think personally, purpose is a big one. If you have had a challenge or something not go your way, reconnecting with that and that why is incredibly powerful. And I think another thing that you touched on, Renee, which is really important here is, are you that psychological safety? Do you have a psychologically safe environment where you can fail? And I've been in a lot of workplaces where this is absolutely not the case. One workplace I worked in it was like literally a whiteboard of shame stuck to a column. And it was, if you did something incorrect, it would go up on that board and you'd be paid out about it. Like one person.
Wow, that's so terrible.
So terrible. They misspelled the word consultant in a report and it was consultant. And so that is what they would call consultants repeatedly, and I went on the whiteboard. I left that organization and I came back in a new consulting role, and they were like, "You're one of them now." It was horrific. It was a very toxic workplace culture, and I obviously won't mention the name of them. So I think that was a really unsafe place for me. And I think if you are an engineer or you come from that STEM background, you probably have been really trained to be risk adverse. And that's fantastic for our job. If 1 in 100 bridges fails, that is catastrophic. And this comes from a guy, Nathan Kritchner. So shout out to him. He's an amazing guy in construction who's a robotics AI expert. And he's been working with Michael to run the Infrastructure Intelligence Lab, which is an AI program for leaders in engineering and construction. And they've just finished their first pilot, and it's been fantastic to see some of those results. So he said this, he said, if you're an engineer, 1 in 100 bridge failures, catastrophic. But in innovation, if you have 1 in 100 successes, like that's amazing. Mm-hmm. And so we have to shift that perspective in that context. So I've known for myself as an engineer, being trained in that way, I notice my response to failure is a bit different because there are really serious consequences. So I think if you had a failure and you're noticing you're having quite a strong reaction and you are trained as an engineer or in STEM, it could be that you've got that, the risk appetite or risk aversion there because of that training. So I think it's something we really need to be mindful of, because often failures are not catastrophic and there's so many things that we can do to repair relationships, and it can be a really strengthening moment. But I also think we just want to add that into the conversation around, is it psychologically safe for you in that team to have those failures? And like, I've got pretty strong views about it now. If that's not your team and you can't do anything about it, I'm like, leave immediately, like get out of there, find a new role. That obviously is hard with, if you have a mortgage and a family and you're supporting those people with your income, it can be really, really challenging to do that. But I think it's really important that we have that purpose for ourselves and that psychological safety in the team as well, to help when we do make failures and make mistakes.
I think just quickly as well, there is an element of, if you're a leader and your team fails at something, there's a really strong and important point to be made around, you need to also take responsibility for that failure. So, for example, if you've got a team member that doesn't hit a deadline, or, you fail to hit something in a project management, I think that there needs to be these questions around, how do we work better together? How do I support my direct reports to be able to deliver so that we don't fail as a team? We shouldn't be thinking about failure just as our own fault. Most of the time when a failure occurs, unless it is, an exam where you didn't study, or, you forget to check your, departure procedures before you take off, a lot of failures that occur in projects are generally multifaceted and have multi-stakeholder involvement, which means that when a failure occurs, it generally isn't just one person's fault. So it's, again, this is where I think great governance and the engineering process really comes in, where you can step back and see, right, how did we end up with this failure? And then, like, who was involved and what was their role, and how can we now, prevent this from happening in the future? So I think when we do have these moments of failure, it can feel really disappointing. It can feel really disorienting, but at the same time, there's a great opportunity to learn from that. And I think that comes back to this innovation and lessons learned state of mind, like where there's a failure or an opportunity, a fall down, a rundown, there's always an opportunity as well. So embrace that failure, find the positives in it, reflect on the negatives and why it happened in the first place, and then curate a path to resolve it as a team. And don't ever point the finger, I think, to one individual. I think that can be really, even if it happens in real life where there is one person responsible for it, it's still ultimately a team failure. And I think that's where you can have conversations with maybe that one individual where they have let you down, but you create more gateways or gate stops for them to meet in the future to avoid that kind of fall down, or you give that person extra support, or you give that person a talking to if their mindset isn't where it needs to be. So there's always something you can learn out of failure, and it's a really positive thing to go through to kind of finesse that process.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that you're right around the team approach, because we are working in teams every single day, and it's okay that team, you could say, if it was something simple like a failure could be not turning up to a meeting on time. Okay, maybe that person sits next to you. Did you say, hey, the meeting's starting in 2 minutes? What could you do to help someone be at the meeting on time? Like a really simple and obvious example. But I think that's so true. We are working in teams. Like, are you checking in on people and creating that culture? It's a challenging conversation talking about failure, but I think it's a really important one. And yeah, if you've got failures, tell us. Let's solve them together. We'd love to support you. And if you are having a challenge in your career at the moment, we would love to hear from you. Thank you for another wonderful episode, Renee. I can't wait to tune in with you in the new year and jump on the podcast again. Thank you, listeners, for another great year. It's 2 years we've been running this podcast. Let us know if you have questions, anything you want us to talk about in 2026. We would love to hear from you. Thank you, Renee. Have a wonderful Christmas season.
Thanks for joining us today on Promoted, the podcast that gets you promoted to be great when you get there. See you in the next one.